Welcome to the Digital Remodeler podcast. So glad you've chosen to join me today. And with me is John Horn from StubGroup. John, thanks for joining us today.
Carl, thank you so much for having me.
So, John, we're going to be talking Google Ads and we're going to be talking about really the changing landscape in Google Ads today. And that's one of your specializations, it's been my background, and it's a changing landscape, frustrates a lot of small business owners. So, I think we're going to have a great conversation. So, I really appreciate you coming in. But start with your background and let's kind of lay the landscape first, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, well, I've been doing Google Ads and digital marketing for over a decade at this point. With StubGroup, the company that I'm the CEO of, I joined 12, 13 years ago. I think at that point I was basically employee number one along with the original founders, and then took over the CEO role about 6 years ago. And yeah, we get to work with all different types of businesses, shepherding them online through Google Ads and other digital media platforms, and ultimately trying to run profitable marketing. Marketing is easy to run. Profitable marketing not always so easy. So that's the focus here.
Yeah, so let's start right there with that word you just used, profitable marketing. Let's define that a little bit. What in your definition is profitable marketing?
Yes, now I love defining terms. So obviously, at the end of the day, profit is making more money than you are spending to acquire that. But it gets more nuanced than that because everyone looks at things a little bit differently. So some businesses are focused on, hey, we need to be making, in day one, when a customer comes to us, we need to make sure that what they're paying to us is more than what we paid in advertising cost to get them, as well as in the cost to actually execute on the service or the products we're sending to them. And then other businesses will look at things like lifetime value, where it's like, okay, we know that once we secure this customer, they're going to be a customer with us for the next 3 years. And here's our average value. And so we can afford to pay X to acquire them. So the exact formula is going to be different for everybody, but ultimately it's how do we make sure that money is actually going into our bank account and not just going into Google or Facebook or someone else's bank account.
Yeah, I think that's critical. And the reason I wanted you to stop there is I think one of the mistakes I see, and I'm sure you see, is a lot of business owners approach Google Ads without knowing their numbers. And you need to understand, what are your numbers going to be? What makes that ad campaign profitable for you before you ever begin? We've got to have the end result in mind. And so I wanted you to cover that because I know that's a mistake I see too many business owners making. They don't know what their objective really is, other than I'm trying to grow my business. But you've got to have a little more clarity than that when you get started. So I appreciate you, laying that groundwork for us. So let's kind of back up. I'm kind of an old guy here, so I started marketing online in the days of dial-up. So uh, but when I started originally with Google Ads, it was all about, have a good list of keywords and know who your target audience was, and you kind of started from there. But things have really evolved. So let's kind of talk about some of the evolution here in the last 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, 18 months, past year. If you can kind of walk us through that.
The story of that evolution, I would say, is the word control, where Google has, as much as they can, tried to take control in many ways away from advertisers. In some ways good, in some ways bad. So like you said, kind of early days, it was kind of a free for all. It was a wild west. It was very much word based of, okay, here's my list of keywords. And back in the day, you would be like, well, if I spell it with an S or not with an S, or if I misspell it, I'm going to get an edge over my competition that maybe isn't targeting that version of the word. And Google over time has gotten much, much smarter and is really focused on the intent behind searches. And they're saying, well, we know what people are searching. We know even what they've been searching for. So we know the last 5 searches they did before they searched for this particular keyword. And so they're all about, okay, what is the intent that you are trying to go after? And using their machine learning and their millions literally of signals that go into every single search to try and match the right ads with the right person. And so we've evolved from these massive lists of keywords to much less. You might have a couple keywords in an ad group or a couple keywords in a campaign, and Google is taking it upon themselves to match a very wide variety of different exact search terms to what you're targeting based upon what they think you're trying to target and ultimately what they see converting. And so this is where the data has become an incredibly important part of successful advertising campaigns on Google, because the most sophisticated advertisers, the ones who are really winning, are feeding information back into Google about what's actually working. So after someone clicks the ads, they're feeding information in about what phone calls are taking place, what form submissions are taking place, orders, things like that. And then Google is looking behind the scenes at the signals that are most likely to then turn into those conversions you're reporting back. And they're saying, all right, we can bid this much or this aggressively for this type of intent, this type of search, or this time of day on this device, etc. And so it's gotten way more involved than back in the day where you had a list of keywords and a billion bid modifiers that you added to all the different manual decisions that you made along the way.
Exactly. And you brought up something so important, John, and that's your feedback loop. And I think so many business owners don't understand that. Your feedback loop today is so critical because Google's ad platform is machine learning driven. And so it is the quality of the data that you're bringing into that loop that really at the end of the day is going to determine the greater degree of success. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And an example I could give of this would be a lot of the businesses we work with, they want to drive a variety of things, but phone calls often super, super important. But not every phone call is created equal. You could have the tire kicker. A great example would be with a client in the B2B space. And there are a lot of consumers who search very similar things and who call, but are not relevant to our client because they only work with businesses. And there's only so much you can do on the keyword side of things because businesses and residential consumers use the same exact words when they search for this thing. There's nothing about what they type in that tells me this is a consumer versus this is a business. And so what we're able to do is we're able to track the calls coming in for this client, and we notate which ones are actually from businesses. We send those back as data to Google saying that these were the relevant conversions. We don't send back the residential ones. And so Google sees, oh, only these ones are converting. And then Google's able to look at way more signals in the back end than we can look at the front end to identify patterns about what's unique about these that are converting. And so over time, we've seen a massive decrease in those irrelevant consumer calls, increase in the business calls, because Google's able to use that machine learning with the relevant data we're putting back into the system to target those people who are likely to be a business calling our client.
Yeah, and you're bringing up something I think is so important, John. You're bringing up tracking. And this is something I think is important for us to stress to our audience. If you're here to run Google Ads, you need to come ready to play. Bring all the right equipment with you. And so I hope our listeners are hearing what you're saying. Come ready to track. Come ready to track your phone calls. Come ready to track your forms. Come ready to collect that data to create that feedback loop. It's not just send people to your website or to your phone and then not collect the relevant data. So that's a change, I think, for a lot of advertisers. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. Yeah, I mean, a lot of advertisers, they will just kind of throw spaghetti at the wall, so to speak. Be like, okay, we're going to get some great ads up, and we're going to get a bunch of business coming in, and it either works well or it doesn't work well. If it works well, they don't, if they're like, oh, well, we spend money and we're getting business in, that's great, but they don't know where that business is coming from, so they can't actually make it work better because they don't know which parts of the campaigns are waste and they're spending money and it's not turning into good customers, and which ones are. So it's more of like, oh, it might work well this month, maybe not well next month, but there's no way to have control over it because they don't know which parts are working. And then if it doesn't work well, if they don't, see the influx of calls or leads or whatever they're looking for, then they say, oh, it's not working, and they turn it off. But we don't know, well, is it not working because this keyword here was driving most of the spend and it wasn't converting? And if we just paused that, these over here would have actually been really profitable. There's no way to know. And that's why, you can never have perfect tracking in this world, in this life. There's always going to be some gaps, but the more you can do to fill in those gaps and get that good data back to Google, the more likely it is you're going to be able to run, those profitable campaigns.
Absolutely. Now, here's something I want to also address, and I think this is also important for advertisers. And that is, and this is a hard conversation for small business owners, and that is coming serious about being an advertiser. And this is a conversation I have with a lot of business owners. Google also knows if you're serious about advertising or if you're just there to dip your toe in the water. And that can really have an effect on the results because they know who's here to play and who's not. What's your take on that? What have you seen?
Yeah, we honestly we discourage a lot of businesses from using Google Ads because they're not ready for it yet. There's a lot of businesses like, oh, I want to spend, $10 a day or throw a little bit here and there, whatever the case may be. And we'll say, hey, that's just not worth it. Like, it's even if it's a small amount of money, you're probably wasting that, because the only way to, generally speaking, make it work well is to have enough of a budget and enough patience where you're going to build up the data that then lets Google's machine learning really see what's working well for you and make you thrive. So if it's like, oh, we're going to run for a month and we're going to spend $500, like don't do that. In most cases, it's, you're just not at a place yet. You can spend your time and money better somewhere else. Come back when you have some patience and some ability to say, okay, we're going to invest this and we're going to run this for at least several months, and we're going to see how this impacts our numbers. We're going to see what our trajectory is over time. Are we able to improve the efficiency of the campaigns over time as we collect data and that type of thing? And those businesses who have some runway, who don't look at advertising as a magic bullet that will fix all those problems, and also who aren't viewing it as kind of their desperation last resort, where it's like, hey, my business is failing, I'm going to run some ads, I'm going to fix my problems. Those are situations, again, we strongly discourage against, because there's usually other problems that are going on there, and advertising is not going to fix those other problems.
That's well said. And you bring up something else that I think is critical for our audience to understand. In the machine learning environment, every time you start, stop, or make a change, you are resetting the learning cycle. If you could expound on that for us, because I think sometimes our listeners don't really understand that. Every little change in machine learning has a big ripple effect.
Yeah, no, it's like a finely tuned machine. And it's not to say that you shouldn't make changes and optimizations, because there absolutely are, things you can do to improve performance. But you have to be really strategic and thoughtful about how you make them, and you have to understand what the potential ramifications are. So let's take as a good example. Let's say you're running a business and you're constantly starting and pausing your campaigns. You're like, oh, I've got enough leads right now, I'm going to pause them and I'm going to restart my campaign next week. Well, you are really, really confusing Google's system, because Google's system works best from consistent data where they see, okay, these are the conversions that came in. Great. You're trying to pay X amount per lead. I call them conversions, we call them leads in this case. Great. You want to pay X amount per lead. Awesome. Well, I'm going to look at kind of the last 7 days, the last 14 days, see what your averages are, what percentage of people who click your ads are turning into leads, and base things upon that. And then you go and you pause your campaigns and you come back to it 7 days from now. And Google's like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't have any data for the last 7 days. And you're generally not going to see the same results you see when you click enable again as you did when you paused 7 days ago, because the system has to relearn. And so when you're making those kind of jerky changes to the system, jerking it around from here or there. Or when you're making, massive changes, be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna, cut my budget down from $100 a day to $25 a day. Well, that's gonna really reset the system, and it's gonna go after different types of traffic. And there are times where you need to do that, but you have to know what to expect from the campaigns after you make a change like that, and how long it may take for the system to kind of relearn and then get back to some normalcy.
So, you talk about this runway, really some learning and seasoning time. What is a realistic expectation that a business owner should have to allow that campaign to optimize itself and really get to, I'm going to call it the sweet spot of performance?
Mm. The rule of thumb, obviously there's always caveats to everything, but kind of the rule of thumb when we bring clients on board, if they haven't been doing much advertising yet in Google, is hey, be prepared to invest at least for 3 months into this. And that's not to say that you shouldn't see improvement over those 3 months. It's not like, hey, you hit 3 months and now everything, suddenly flips and it was terrible and now it's good. Like, we need to see a good trajectory during those months. But that is going to allow Google, generally speaking, enough time to learn, to go through cycles, for us to see as we manage things, what's working well, what's not working well, as it goes through your sales cycle, and make optimizations accordingly. So 3 months is kind of the average. Obviously, there's caveats, there's nuances depending upon where you're at, and there's also the reality that, like, the more you spend, the faster the data is that you collect. So you could think about it, hey, I could spend $1,000 a month over 6 months, or I could spend, $3,000 across 2 months. It's still the same amount of spend, but you're going to collect more data much more quickly to be able to see what's working well and what's not working well. So the more kind of conservative you are with your budget, the longer it's going to take to collect the same amount of data. But that said, I do usually recommend being conservative with budget going into things, because it is easy to waste money with Google. And so we want to make sure that we have the right guidelines or the guardrails in place, and that we're not, seeing a bunch of irrelevant traffic coming through before you start to scale your budget too much.
Yeah, I know you brought up a great term there, guardrails. So in this machine learning environment, guardrails are important. And let's talk about guardrails. What are some of the guardrails in the machine learning environment that we do have to have in place?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones I'll start with is going to be negative keywords. So it's this idea where if you're running campaigns targeting people who are searching for things, often there are going to be specific words where, if they search for this, they're not relevant to you, but Google doesn't know that, or Google's not going to learn that until they spend a bunch of your money and realizing it's not working. A great example would be the word free, for example. If someone's searching for free plus whatever your keyword is, most of the time they're not going to be relevant to you unless you're, doing something for free and you have another way of monetizing that. And so you want to start out with a good list of kind of obvious negative keywords where you don't want to waste money on people who are searching for that. And then it's very important, as the campaigns are running, to be watching what they call the search term reports. Obviously, the lingo, the search terms reports, where Google tells you exactly what people are searching, that are then matching the keywords you told them to target. And you're going to almost always realize, oh, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that's not relevant to me. I'm going to add that as a negative keyword. And over time, you're cutting waste by doing things like that. So there are a lot of guardrails. That's kind of one of the easiest and I would say most influential starting out for search campaigns.
Absolutely. And now, one of the other things that I think is critical as well, John, is a lot of business owners try to do this by themselves. I think, I'm just going to open up my Google Ads account and I'm going to try and do this myself. And part of their frustration is that's where they burn a lot of money. And so let's talk about why you may want to hire somebody like yourself to come alongside you and really help you through this process, because the complexities, let's kind of talk the value of having somebody manage this behemoth for you.
Yes, it can be deceptively easy to use Google Ads, because Google, they build it as a DIY platform. and they market it as a DIY platform. They're always sending, hey, here's your free coupon to start with Google Ads, things like that. And it's very easy to open up a Google Ads account, click a couple buttons, and follow Google's recommendations. They'll be like, oh, this is best practice. Most people do this, et cetera, et cetera. You click a couple buttons and suddenly you're spending money. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of those, recommendations, best practices from Google, I'm not going to say they're malicious on Google's part, but they just can't take the nuances of your business into account. And a best practice for one business over here might be a really bad thing for you. Or sometimes, some of their best practices are usually not good for most advertisers, where they try and funnel your money. And so, yeah, it's very tempting, obviously, to say, hey, I don't want to spend money on an agency or a freelancer or hiring somebody. I can do it. I can write ads. I know what keywords I should target. I know what my customers want, and you absolutely can do that and can go run those campaigns. But time and again, we see people who are doing that then come to us, and we look at things and like, you wasted so much money here, so much money there. You've wasted time because it's taken so much longer to get where you want to be than if you just work with someone who knew what they were doing. And so that's the value that we bring. And we say, hey, we know the right things to do, the wrong things to avoid. There's still a lot of trial and error and learning that we're going to do in your ad account, because every business is unique, every market is unique. It's not like you take a template and say, this is perfection, we're just going to apply this to your business. That's not how it works. But there are so many shortcuts and pitfalls that we can help businesses move past, just because we spend all day every day doing this, and so we've made all the mistakes, we've learned all the things, so that our clients don't have to do that each and every time themselves.
Yeah. And while we're on this topic, how about those phone calls from those really helpful Google Ads reps that are going to help you optimize your account?
Ironically, I get so many of those every day because I'm connected to so many accounts. And yeah, those are, a lot of people need to understand those are sales reps who have very, very little training. Generally speaking, they're working for third-party companies that Google hires, that they're allowed to say they work with Google, but they're not even technically Google employees. And they have a script, they have some best practices that they're incentivized to get you to follow. And is it possible for those best practices to be good for you? Yeah, sometimes they are. Like sometimes there's a good recommendation, but most of the time they're not tailored to you and your business and what's going to make you successful. They're tailored towards what Google has found makes them money, and kind of it's the list of best practices they want to see adopted. And so you have to take those with a massive grain of salt. And unfortunately, for a lot of advertisers, they don't know how to apply that salt to the situation, because they don't know which parts of what Google is saying are going to be right for them and which parts are wrong. And so they end up just saying yes to all of it. And I've seen a lot of unfortunate situations after them saying yes to everything, and seeing a little bit of a mess afterwards.
Yeah. I think it's important for us to the reason I ask that question is often that call is you're missing out on so much traffic.
Yeah.
That's the hook, And one of the things that is so important for our listeners to understand is there is so much traffic available. And just as we were talking with these optimizations that in the DIY side, um, the platform is geared towards Google's advantage. It's not always geared towards you, the advertiser. And one of the things that working with someone like John is so important for is you need somebody that understands what you're trying to accomplish. And that Google rep doesn't always understand that. In fact, most of the time they don't. And that's the importance of having an expert working with you. So, John, in your experience, you've worked with a lot of advertisers, a lot of different niches and industries. What
Mhm.
separates the successful advertiser from the advertiser that just fails and has a bad experience?
The biggest thing, ironically, has really nothing to do with advertising, and it comes down to the quality of their business, which seems obvious to say, but advertising is, as they say, it's fuel on the fire. So if you have a business that has a good product market fit, you have a good reputation, you do right by your customers, you know your numbers, you have good margins. So when you get new customers, you actually make profit. That's a fantastic foundation. And then you can use advertising to scale that to get more customers that go into your good pipelines that you're equipped to sell and get good reviews and rinse and repeat, etc. Versus a lot of businesses, they look for shortcuts and they look for advertising as a way to shortcut things, and they don't have the right processes in place to do a good job on the sales, to actually convert leads into customers, to do right by those customers and give a good quality product or service. And so they can last for a while, but they don't usually last long term. So most important thing, actually have a good business that people want to work with and that is priced appropriately, is competitive, etc. And then I would say the second thing that sets those good marketers and advertisers apart is patience and willingness to figure out which parts of their advertising are working well, double down on those, cut what's not working. Again, it's why tracking is so important, and really letting the data dictate their decisions rather than the emotions, and rather than chasing the shiny new object of, oh, hey, there's this new campaign type, there's this new platform, and always jumping on the new thing, as opposed to, hey, let's build a good solid foundation, this works, and let's keep working our way and testing conservatively from there.
Yeah, I love what you just brought up too. I think it's important to emphasize you always want to be testing. Um, Always be testing. I think that's so critical, especially Google is rolling out new things all the time. Always be testing. I think that's something we have to stress constantly. So, John, as we kind of wind down, what would be your, maybe top two or three golden nuggets you would want to leave with our audience?
Yeah, I'll mostly reiterate what we've talked about, and we'll look for something new as well. But tracking, incredibly important. It's not glamorous, but it's make or break it, generally speaking, for successful advertising campaigns. So work with somebody who can track calls, who can track form submissions in your website, track whatever you want people to do, track those and track them back into the Google Ads campaign, so that you don't just know the number of forms you got, but in Google, okay, this keyword, this campaign, this search term drove them. So tracking, super important. And then patience, again, have some patience. Like we talked about, it takes some time to see and to optimize campaigns that are working well. And here's a very specific nugget I would say. A lot of advertisers, they spend a ton of time thinking about their ads and that side of things, and zero time thinking about the landing page on their website that they send traffic to. And the number of ugly websites I've seen that don't communicate what you do, that don't tell people how they can contact you, and then they spend thousands and thousands of dollars on ads getting people to those websites, it's a little heartbreaking. So really think about your website, where you send traffic to, and make sure that's optimized to actually present your brand well and get people to take the action that you want them to take.
I think that's great. So, John, if somebody wants to learn more about you, learn more about StubGroup, connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, best place to learn more, stubgroup.com. Got lots of info in there, ways to contact us. We also put out a lot of free info on our YouTube channel. So search Stub Group on there, and all sorts of content around Google Ads and digital marketing in general.
Fantastic. John, thanks for joining us today. And it's been good having you. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in to the Digital Remodeler. We look forward to having you on our next episode.